Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today's video, going to be doing the same thing that I did last year. So I'm going to be saying the 10 fights which I think should happen, 10 boxing fights I think should happen in 2024. If you have not watched last year's one, I went and did this last year. Some fights might still be on there from last year. They just haven't happened yet, and I'm still interested for them. I'm just going to go through my top 10. Of course, they're all personal opinion, and I'm probably missing out on some big fights, but if you want to list them in the comments below. I'm also doing one for the UFC tomorrow, so be sure to go watch that as well. But yeah, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So, starting off, I'm going to mention fights which have also been announced because I feel like it's 2024, the fights, they're happening, I want to see them. So we're starting off with one which has already been announced, and of course I'm very excited for Fury versus Usyk. It's the fight to make. It's the boxing fight to make. It's the fight which is the biggest fight in boxing. It's, everybody knows it's for all of the heavyweight belts. It's the first time that all of the heavyweight belts are going to be on the line since Lennox Lewis had it ages ago. So, this is definitely the fight to make. It's the fight which has been built up for a long time. I'm pretty sure I had this on my prediction or on my 10 fights that should happen last year. And obviously it hasn't come to happen this year. There's been a lot of talks about it. It's been going back and forth. There was a time which, personally, I thought the fight would probably never actually end up happening. But it seems like, we've got it now, and it seems like it's not actually going to go away. Obviously, there's still things that could get in the way. It's not till February. But for the moment, it looks like it's happening. I'm so excited for it. I'm sure everybody in the boxing world's excited for it. And yeah, that's my number one pick, and the fight in boxing, which is the most important in my opinion, and should be the one that is happening, and it is happening. Moving on to my second one, Canelo versus Benavidez. There's been a lot of talk about this. Benavidez has been working his way up after a very successful year this year. Obviously, he beat Caleb Plant, he beat Demetrius Andrade. It's been a very good year for him. He's looking like the best fighter in the super middleweight division, the top contender. He's been the top contender for a while, and Canelo has been not ducking him but fighting other guys. He's been looking at other options, and it still seems like he's not set on fighting him until possibly September time, which is still a long way away. But the way that things are going with Benavidez and the way that he's been winning, I think if he's probably gonna fight before then, and I think he'll win again. And I mean, I look at any of the other guys in the top of that division, and I think Benavidez beats them all. I think he possibly could beat Canelo. I think if with Canelo waiting so long to fight somebody like Benavidez, so dangerous as Benavidez, it could come back to bite him. Like, he is going to be getting older. He's going to have taken more damage and been in lots more fights. And Benavidez, I think, is only going to improve and become better and better with every fight. And yeah, so I think waiting for this fight's probably been a bad decision for Canelo, but obviously he has done, and like I say, it's probably going to happen this next year around September, October time, but it has to happen, and it's a fight which I'm beyond excited for, and like I say, should have probably happened already now. But I mean, Canelo's fighting probably May time. He says he wants to fight maybe Munguia, somebody like that, maybe Charlo. I don't know the other Charlo, but they're risky fights. Obviously, he's had a good year as well, beating Ryder and Charlo, and in his last fight he won convincingly. But you never know, a fight like that he could lose, and then the fight's off the cards. And Benavidez, he deserves to have a world title, and it's quite bad that he doesn't have one. And maybe he'll go on to fight Morrell. I don't know, but like I say, that's a fight which definitely should happen next year. Moving on to my third pick. I think I said this last year as well. Bivol Beterbiev. It's a great fight. It's the fight in the light heavyweight division. Two guys who are very contrasting in styles, in my opinion. I mean, we've just seen Bivol recently completely control a fight and outbox masterclass Lyndon Arthur. It was people are calling it a robotic performance because everything he does was so sharp, so quick, so like I said, it was like a robot. It was just so clinical, and everything he does is so spiteful. But then you got Beterbiev, who is just so aggressive. He is getting everybody out of there. Nobody can last with him, and he just completely bullies you. And I don't know. It's just something a bit different. It's a fight which, like I say, is a contrasting of styles, but is a great fight, and it's the fight to make. It seems like it might be happening around April, March time. Obviously, Beterbiev has to go on and beat Callum Smith, which on paper I think he probably will. But for the next fight afterwards, it has to be that fight, and for all the belts, or for most of the belts, I think it's all the belts actually. It's completely a fight which should happen. Moving on to my fourth pick, Haney versus Davis. A great lightweight fight. Well, super lightweight fight probably will be. Davis, I suppose it might be at catchweight. I don't know if Davis can make it up to super lightweight, and I don't know if he's going to be at his best at super lightweight. I'd like this fight to be at a fight at a weight which obviously both of them can do well at. I mean, we've seen Haney looked quite drained at lightweight this year, and I mean, he's had a good year. He's coming off a very good performance against Prograis. Obviously, had a bit of a maybe more subjective victory against Lomachenko earlier on in the year, but I still think this is the fight to make. I mean, Davis, in my opinion, is the best lightweight in the world. I think even with people like Shakur Stevenson at the moment, I don't know. He has probably the skills to be better than Davis, but Davis is just proving it a lot more, and having another great performance against Ryan Garcia showed that he is, like I mentioned, the best lightweight in the world in my opinion. And Haney, obviously him being at super lightweight, it probably will be difficult to get a weight which is both right for them, but that's a fight which I think should be happening. Garcia is seemingly going to fight Haney next, or it's talked about that happening. Obviously that's a great fight, and it's a fight which I'll be tuning in for, I'll be excited for, but I think Davis, like I say, he's the better guy, he's the harder style, he's the tougher fighter, and I think that's the fight that has to happen. It's another contrasting of styles, really. Haney being the person who's trying to avoid, and Davis also being the person who's trying to avoid, but then trying to counter with his own spiteful shots, and him being the powerful one, but also being very, very fast. And it's different to Prograis, who was just a bit more of a powerful fighter, and maybe didn't have quite as much speed or quite as much timing and countering ability as that of Davis. And like I say, he's just such a difficult guy to face, and I don't think Haney would have faced anybody like him. But like I say, Haney is on a very good run at himself, and he's just completely masterclass Prograis, who's been doing so well as well, and so he's also, like I say, performing very well, showing such a good technical aspect of his game. Moving on to my fifth position, I've got with my first women's fight, Taylor vs Serrano 2. I think that's a fight which definitely has to happen next year. I think they're both going to be getting on in their careers. I don't know how much longer Serrano and Taylor have left. I mean, Serrano's talked about only having a few more and then wanting to retire, and I'm sure Taylor, she probably will end up going on to fight Cameron again, but after that, if she wins or loses, I feel like that fight with Serrano is always going to be there, and that's probably going to be the last big fight and the last fight which people really care about, and I think that'll be the fight to make. I'm sure Serrano would love to go out on that fight. If she wins or if she loses, it would be a huge fight for both fighters to possibly go out on and put on one last big show for the fans, and it would sell out. I believe most places it would go, and it would be a huge fight, and like I say, it would be a good way to end up both of their careers, and it should happen next year realistically. Moving on to my sixth position, this is maybe a bit more of a just my personal subjective opinion one. Ryan versus McCaskill 2. The first fight was, it was a bad points decision in my opinion. It was a bad win for McCaskill, and it's a win which I don't think she deserved. It's sad to see that the governing bodies aren't really willing to force the rematch between Ryan and McCaskill, but I think Ryan most definitely deserves the rematch. It's a fight which she worked very hard for. I mean, in my opinion, I think she won. This was her kind of big chance to become that world champion, and kind of got stripped away from her in a bit of a very unfair fashion. And people are talking about corruption and all that, but I don't really want to go into anything like that. I don't know if that was the case or not, so I can't really say anything, but I still think it's definitely a fight which should be made again. Hopefully it will be, in my opinion, definitely Ryan's she deserves it, and as a British person myself, I'm a fan of her, and like I say, I feel like she's been wrong done and deserves that rematch, and hopefully that'll happen next year. Moving on to my seventh position, I've gone with Inoue versus Lopez. So Inoue, I mean, he's coming off a great victory versus Parles. Seems like he's going to fight Luis Neri, Casemiro, Akhmadaliev. One of them three, possibly two of them three. He seems like he wants to have a bit more of an active year next year. He's fighting seemingly in May, and then he might fight again, and then possibly at the back end of next year, he then might move up into featherweight. And I would love to see him move up into featherweight. Obviously, people are talking about what weight can he go up to, but I'd just like to see him at featherweight. I think featherweight would be a division which gives him crazily good challenges, makes for crazily good fights, and I think Lopez could be that of a fight. Obviously, he has to be Abe, and then he probably will end up fighting a couple other people before then. But I think as a champion, he's probably the best one in my opinion for Inoue to fight. People are talking about Robeisy Ramirez. That would be a good fight, but obviously Robeisy Ramirez has to go in and fight Espinoza and possibly win again. I mean, he has to rematch him. He probably will end up getting a rematch, but he has to go and win that fight. I think Espinoza versus Inoue could be a good fight because obviously how tall Espinoza is and how he still hits hard himself. But I think the Lopez fight is the fight to make. It's going to be dealing with immense power from Lopez, and how is Inoue going to be dealing with somebody who, yet again, with him moving up in a weight category against somebody who has been very dominant as well. I mean, Lopez winning against the likes of Warrington and Conlon in his next fight, and if he beats Abe as well, he's been a very good champion and been ruthless in his reign. And I think Inoue versus Lopez could be a great fight. Moving on to my 8th pick, I've gone with Wood versus Cordina. Super featherweight fight for a British fight. It's a huge fight. It's, like I say, I mean, Eddie Hearn's talked about it. It's a huge fight. It's Wood moving up a division against Cordina, who's coming off quite a tough performance in his last fight against somebody who people didn't really expect to be quite so tough. But it was a tough fight for him. Obviously, he got through that, but Wood, it would make for a massive fight. It's Wood. He's coming off a fight which he was probably losing, and he was losing, but then he goes to win and shock it and end up getting a huge victory. But now he's moving up in weight. Is the rematch versus Warrington going to happen? Nobody really knows yet. But that Cordina fight, Eddie Hearn's talked about it. It's a huge fight to make. It's a fight which, it's gonna sell out anywhere it goes really. And I think it would be a tough fight for Wood. It would be a tough fight for Cordina, but it would be a very tough fight for Wood. But he's defied the odds on multiple occasions now, and you never know. It could be another Wood win. That's what makes him as a fighter so good. You can never really count him out. But that is my 8th position. Moving on to my 9th position. It's a fight which has been talked about. Probably will end up happening. For my personal self, it's a fight which I'd love to see. Lomachenko versus Kambosos Jr. I just love watching Lomachenko fight, in my opinion. Obviously, people are talking about him getting robbed versus Haney. It was a very close fight, and I'd never really like to say anybody was robbed, but, it was a very close fight, and Lomachenko still deserves big fights, and it seems like he's getting another one here with Kambosos Jr. Kambosos Jr. is coming off a very questionable win versus Maxi Hughes, but, this is going to make for a good fight, in my opinion. I think Kambosos Jr., any weaknesses he might have in his game is going to be exposed via Lomachenko, but Kambosos Jr. being the possibly fresher guy, you never know, he could cause maybe not an upset, but could become and if he wins, I suppose, against Lomachenko, it can make for a huge fights for him, I suppose, moving on. And Kambosos versus Lomachenko, it's a great matchup, and it will be a great fight. Moving on to my final fight, 10th position, Crawford versus Charlo, that being Jermall Charlo. I think that makes for a big fight. Obviously, there's a few weight categories in between it. I mean, Crawford moving up to super welterweight and Charlo fighting at middleweight. Obviously, Crawford's been talking about fighting Canelo. I realistically don't think that fight should happen. Obviously, people talk about weight classes for a reason, but there is weight classes for a reason, and I don't know if that should happen. But Jermall Charlo, I think that's more a realistic type fight. I understand that Crawford only really wants the big fights now. Probably gonna not end up rematching Spence, and so that's probably the biggest fight he's got around at the moment, especially being moving up in weight. And super middleweight, super welterweight to middleweight, it's not a huge jump. It's not like Canelo, who is a big super middleweight. It's Crawford versus Charlo and Jermall Charlo, and Jermall really should be fighting tougher guys and really stepping up now. And I think Crawford versus Charlo could make for a huge fight. It would be a huge pay-per-view. It would sell out anywhere in America, and that's the fight to make for Crawford, in my opinion, to give him another big fight. And like I say, completely understand with him being that of a pound for pound best fighter, and he only does really want the big fights. And moving up to super welterweight, there's not loads of huge fights in the super welterweight division, so he has to look around, and that's exactly what he's doing. And in my opinion, that's the fight that should be made. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like I say, UFC one coming tomorrow. If you're interested in that, watch that one. Like the video if you didn't like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.